Welcome to the Money Chisme podcast, a fun and safe space for personal finance, investing, and entrepreneurship tips where we get the chisme on all things money with sass and humor. I am your host, Violeta, a first-generation Mexican immigrant, a real estate investor, entrepreneur, and I am here to help you kick ass in the financial game. Each week, I not only bring you expert tips, but also share the financial freedom and entrepreneurship journeys from our own community because representation is important. So grab un cafecito or si quieres an adult beverage and let's get into this week's Money Chisme. I have lost so much money from the financial mistakes that I have made when I was younger. So once you get started in your personal finance journey, it's easy to look back and see the mistakes that you made when you were younger. And sometimes you're like, man, I wish that I could go back in time and tell my younger self what I know now. So here are 5 money lessons that I wish I could go back in time and tell my younger self. The first mistake was with savings, and it's actually a 2-part. The first one was that I really didn't set money aside for like a rainy day. Young Violeta was over here living in the now, and if I did save, it was mostly towards like something that I wanted to do, like for example a cruise or something similar. But eventually I realized that I gotta put some money aside and start saving some of my money. And this is where the second part comes in, is that once I did, finally decide that, I'm going to be responsible and actually save some of my money and put it aside, I was doing it with just a regular savings account from a regular bank. The problem was that even though I was, setting money aside, is that I didn't take into account inflation. I didn't realize how inflation impacted the money that I had in my savings account. The thing is, inflation, you lose value of the money that you have in the long run. And by having it in a bank that paid me basically almost nothing, like less than a percentage point for APY, which APY is just your annual percentage yield, which is just your rate of return of your money that you have in there. And I recently looked at what, because I still have them open. But I recently looked at one of them and it was like at 0.01 APY, which is like nothing. And with especially inflation recently having gone up to like 5%, and it was like, it has been high. Like you can see how over time I was losing money. I was losing the value that I was putting into there. Now, eventually I did figure out what inflation was and how it affected my money, but I did take a step towards the right direction where I ended up opening a CD, which is a certificate of deposit from my bank. They offered it to me. They told me I got 3% back. APY. And so I was like, okay, something better than just having it in a regular, old savings account. The problem was that a CD usually requires you to freeze those funds for a certain amount of time, and that's how you would get the 3%. So I had to freeze my money for, I think that one was for a year. So you could imagine that, like, if something did come up, like I was screwed. Like, how was I going to get my money, because they would give you a penalty. You couldn't get it out if something came up, and I couldn't get out for a year. It was stuck there. So that was a huge problem. Finally, I learned about high yield savings accounts, which, is basically, what the name sounds like. It's a savings account that's going to give you a high yield in APY. And once I found this out, it was a game changer. I switched over immediately. Now, the thing is, with most high yield savings accounts, they are from online banks and they don't have a physical location. But you're still, with technology now, it's so easy to move your money back and forth. So you still have access to your funds. And the one that I use is Upgrade. It is giving me a little over 5% APY, which is freaking awesome. I've been using it for a while, and it's easy to move my money back and forth. I have access to it whenever I want. And the funds are insured by the FDIC. If you're interested, I will put the link down below to open an account with Upgrade. It is a referral link, but we both get the bonus, so it's a win-win. But there's a lot out there, so you can find one that fits your needs. The next mistake that has cost me money was my credit score. Being a first generation immigrant, it is common in our culture to, avoid debt and avoid kind of big like banks and stuff. Besides just a regular bank, we avoid like credit, anything to use with credit. We avoid credit cards. We don't want to accumulate debt. We pay everything with cash. And, that stems from the mistrust of these banks and, some financial anxiety, but that's for another day. And I grew up with the same mentality from my parents, right? And so I didn't, use credit cards for quite some time. But the problem was that eventually I had to go get a loan for a car because I had moved to another state due to the military. So I needed some type of transportation to get to work. So I had to go find a car, and I didn't have, all the funds to buy a car outright. So I had to go look for a loan. And I had zero credit, like zero, none. And so when I started looking for a car and I found this 2008 Honda Accord, it was gold, it had leather seats, I loved it. I had to go look for a loan, and I ended up with, I think it was like 16% to 18% interest rate on that loan. The car cost me about 25K, and my car payment was about over $600. And so for 5 years, I made those payments, and, I was stuck with that because I didn't have a credit score, and eventually I paid it off. And I did end up at least using that car for 10 years. So it was nice to not have a car payment for a few years. But that, incident, made me realize how much credit score impacts you. And now, as a real estate investor, I'm always making sure that my credit score is on point. Now, building a credit score brings me to my next mistake, which is because I was taught to avoid debt, I avoided credit cards. And credit cards is one of the easy ways to build up your credit score. Now, of course, you want to make sure you use credit cards correctly and responsibly by making sure that you're paying them on time, that you're not maxing them out, that you're trying to strategically use them by making your payments before interest hits. But eventually, I decided to go get a credit card because I saw it as a way, like, you never know when I might need something. Maybe I get a flat tire and I need to buy a new tire or something like that for the car. It was mostly for things like that I had in my mindset. So I went and got a credit card, and then I just never used it. So it just sat there, and I thought that was enough. But the thing is, you have to use this credit card, one, because sometimes if you don't use it, it's going to close on you, and you don't want to have a closed account. It's going to negatively impact your credit score. And two, it's not building credit if you're not using it. So I had to start using it and learn how to use it. And actually, using credit cards has been a game changer, because there are a lot of credit cards out there, and there's two main types of credit cards that you can have. It's either you get cash back or you get points. and you could get cash back on whatever you use, depending on what the credit card rules are for that specific card. Or you could get points that you can use for flights. And this is how I started using those credit cards to, pay some bills or whatever. And I insure with one of my cards is a travel card. So I get 5 times points every time I book a flight with that card. And eventually I end up having a free flight. And I've used it several times at this point. I've gotten several free flights. So that has been, helping out. And there's so many strategies to use credit cards. It's kind of like with couponing. You can really, if you do the research and know all these strategies, like there's out there, you could search them up on YouTube, and you could transfer points to another platform and get more bang for your buck, and like really take the max benefit of these cards. And the last thing with credit cards is that they actually have more protections than a regular debit card. For example, one of my credit cards, if I go buy something and the store doesn't want to give me a refund, one of my credit cards, has basically a guarantee and will, refund my money anyways, and then they'll go fight with the store and figure it out. But that's an extra protection. And there's other protections based on specific cards. So when you get one, check out those, because you will actually have some better benefits and protections based instead of like a debit card. And so I've learned to use my credit cards, more often rather than my debit card, because one, I get either cash back or I get the points, and two, I'm better protected. When I joined the military, it was the first time that I had access to a retirement investment plan. In the military, it's called a thrift savings plan, TSP, but basically it's similar to a 401k plan. They're both retirement investment accounts, but they have slight differences. And when I joined, they told me about it, and they're like, sign up because it's an investment, and for your retirement and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, but like, so I signed up, but that's pretty much all I did. And this is the one that really annoys me, because like for years I lost money because I did not realize that when I joined, when I signed up, I'm assuming that at the beginning they were just like, put it in this fund for now and then go do your research later. And I failed to go do my research later and change it. So I kept it in a G fund, which is basically just, a fund that has a lot of investment like treasuries and stuff like that, stuff that's government backed and insured. And the problem is that, yes, it's low risk, but it's also very low reward. So I was barely making anything with that. So I was sending a few $100s a month for years. And I wasn't really making much of a return because I had it in this G fund that was safe, but it was pointless at this point. Now, eventually I figured it out, and I moved my funds and increased my how much I was sending to those accounts, and I started getting way better returns, and so now I'm doing better. But the other thing that I did not take advantage during this time was the matching. So sometimes, depending on your plan, the company that you work for, or for example, with mine for TSP, they will match either a certain percentage or a certain amount from what you contribute. So for example, if I put $1,000 into my account, then they're going to put another 1,000 to match my 1,000. So then I have more money in my investment. And that's a huge benefit that you want to make sure that you take advantage, and you just got to make sure what's your max for your plan, and just make sure that throughout the year you take full advantage of that. The last financial mistake that really cost me money was that I just didn't keep a budget. To me, like I had a few bills and I was like, you know what, I will just mentally keep track of these things. And, most of these things I just put automatically in to be taken out of my account and pay these bills. So my bills were always on point, like they were always getting paid off. And so that's just how I manage my money. I just made sure my bills were paid, and everything else, I just used up. And at that time, this was the same time where I wasn't saving money or anything like that, because I didn't know how to manage my money and how to create a budget. And so I had no plan. And so most of my money, went to who knows where. And, some of it went into that $600 car payment. And of course, I had to pay mortgage and stuff like that. Uh, but, I know, was single, no kids, no nothing. So what was I spending my money on? And who knows? Because I didn't have a budget. I didn't know where all my money was going. But eventually, I figured out that, what, I need to get serious about, my finances. And so I decided to create a budget, and, I started researching how to do that, and, tips for budgeting, and try to find maybe like spreadsheets or stuff like that. And so eventually I found a budget that I kind of liked, and it's the 60/40, which, 60% is for your main expenses like housing, car, your bills, things like living expenses. And the 40% is actually broken down into four blocks of 10% each. And each one is basically savings, but they're different types of savings. So one is going to be for your retirement, one is going to be for long-term savings, then you got your short-term savings, and then the fourth block is just, for fun money. Maybe you want to save up for a certain bag or certain shoes, or you want to save up for a fancy computer or something like that, or travel. And so I really liked the way that budget works. So I started using that, and it really started really changing how my finances were being managed. And I was starting to like save and starting to plan. And so I was being more financially responsible. And now that budget has evolved like so much. I still have a lot of blocks. It's not 60/40 anymore, because there's so much other things that I have to take into account. Like, now I invest in real estate. Now I have, kids, I have dogs, I have, the property and land and all this stuff. So I have lots of things to budget for. But because of that foundation that I built, I'm able to do all these things and manage everything that I am working on. And the idea is really just to plan and manage your funds and make sure you know where your money is going. And I will give you one extra tip is that, create separate accounts. So I have so many accounts. I have like several savings accounts. I still have a few more that I need to create, because I want to split off accounts for like specific travel and specific emergency funds. And then I want a separate account for something else that we're planning. And so you can do that as well. Have different accounts. I have one for travel. I have one for my bills. Then we have one for our joint bills. Then we have for our emergency fund. Then I have an emergency fund for my properties and stuff like that. And so I just block out everything. And when money comes in, I just have everything automatically go. And so that way it's automatic, and I already get used to just living with a certain amount of money because it's gone before I even know it's there. So that's one tip. Now, yes, I have made a lot of financial mistakes, especially when I was younger. And many of us have too. And it's easy to look back and compare your younger self to the person that you are now. And you may feel guilt, you may feel regret, you might even feel anger towards your younger self. And, once I started learning about personal finance and how to manage my finances and all that stuff, like would reflect on all the poor decisions that I made when I was younger. And I felt that too. I felt the guilt. I felt the shame. I really was angry at myself because I was like, man, if I could have just made better decisions at that point. I could have had a bigger investment account. I could have had more savings. I could have bought more properties. Like I could have been, so many things that could have, should have, would have. But like, it's important to just, give yourself grace, forgive your past poor decisions, and then just, move forward, learn and do better now. We have figured out, better ways to do things. We're in this financial journey. We're learning, we're building our financial literacy. And the key thing is that you're doing it now. Like, once you learn about it, make the change, and then, and move forward, and just give yourself grace. You can now share your thoughts with me by sending me a text, and that link is down in the show notes. Share your thoughts. What were your money mistakes that you made when you were younger? But other than that, that's it for this episode, and I'll see you in the next one. Hasta la próxima. Bye. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like and share this episode so others can also find this podcast. Don't forget to follow me on all my social medias listed in the show notes below, where you can also find resources to help you in your financial journey. If you're interested in becoming a guest on the podcast, you can find that information in the show notes. Other than that, thank you so much for your support, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.